Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for July 25th, 2023. The elected body is here and present. Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Peter Vanstrom, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland, and I'm Randy Knight, the City Administrator, along with David Davidson, City Attorney, and Executive Assistant to the Council, Michelle Miller. Purpose of committee meetings are for city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agendas. By ordinance, the committee consists of mayor and city council members and the city administrator, and the city administrator serves as chair of the committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is certainly open to the public, we do not generally take comments or questions from the public unless specifically authorized by this committee. Excuse me. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings on the second and fourth Monday of each month in city council chambers, as well as the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage our residents to engage on online platforms if you have any questions or need any information. And we also encourage you to utilize the City of Roswell app or service web portal for items that raise an issue or concern to you. And we also encourage everyone to access Roswell 365, which is a calendar of events here in the City of Roswell. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for June 27, 2023. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right. Also at this time, I will entertain any recommendation for the order of the agenda. Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to request to move from the addendum item number 13, consideration of a text amendment to the UDC to sections 5.34 carriage house and 5.52 use table to the first item before the committee this evening.
All right. Now it's a motion by Mayor Wilson. I'll entertain a second. Second by Council Member Hall. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. That passes. All in favor. All right. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Well, seeing the amendment to the agenda, we will handle that item first, which is community development. Item number 13, consideration of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code, UDC, to sections 5.3.4, carriage house, and 5.52 use table. Mayor Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, with the chair's permission, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission Chairman, Kitty Singleton, to come up and address the committee before Jackie even has to do anything.
Seeing no objection, assuming no objection from the committee. All right, welcome. Right here. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, Kitty.
Thank you. Kitty Singleton, I'm chair of the Planning Commission, resident of Roswell. I just wanted to make a comment about this carriage house text amendment that has come initiated again. And we've had a lot of carriage house amendments come through recently, and carriage houses, accessory dwelling units have been a topic of conversation over the past year, and we're continuing to address it around the margins in many different ways, in many different areas. This in adding carriage houses to an entirely new zoning classification, and Planning Commission feels it would be best to sort of address these all at once and make sure we understand what we're putting on lots in different ways in different places with these accessory dwelling units, including carriage houses. And it would be our hope that we could look at them as a whole and make sure we understand what we're doing with these buildings behind single-family homes.
Thank you, Kitty.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to make a motion to the body, to this incredibly established and highly esteemed body, that we make a motion that we put the issue as outlined by the Planning Commission Chairman back onto the Planning Commission to begin work engendering towards solutions towards, as Kitty said, not just carriage houses, but really all adjacent structures. Give me the terminology again, Kitty, because I screwed it up all day long.
Accessory dwelling units.
Thank you, very
including
simple,
carriage
accessory
houses.
dwelling, yes. ADUs, thank you. That be the issue, that we put that on the, a task among our planning commission to begin solving for the ADU issue at large. That would be the motion I put in front of the committee.
All right, there's a motion from Mayor Wilson.
So clarification. So then planning commission would work on this, come up with their recommendations on how to address, and then ultimately would come back to this committee where if there's agreement from the committee, this would then be moved to council to initiate any amendments? Is that the?
100%, Councilman, yes, sir.
All right, I second.
All right, we have the motion from Mayor Wilson and a second from Councilmember Palermo. Further discussion, Councilmember Beeson.
Would we be able to ask staff if there's currently a need for clarification on ADUs as a whole outside of just, obviously, we were talking about carriage houses specific to the historic district. In this situation, we're opening the can of worms for accessory dwelling units across the entire city. Are we permitted to ask staff if there's currently a high need for that? They're coming.
Mr. James?
Good afternoon, committee. I think the best way to answer that question is that right now, the Unified Development Code does not specifically speak to accessory dwelling units. There's no defined term within the UDC for that. So I think, if the planning commission and/or staff is going to take this on, that's probably the baseline, to kind of establish what, ADUs themselves are, and whether it's going to be separate from carriage houses or whether they're going to be lumped together. These are all details that we'd have to work out as that task is undertaken.
Secondary question, sorry. Is this something instead that could go to community development staff as opposed to planning commission? I guess my hesitancy is planning commission isn't inherently familiar with a lot of these terms, their impacts on the city, regulations that go behind it. ADUs are also something that are very popular in a lot of cities right now. It's with no disrespect to the planning commission at all. It's a resident commission that's there to provide resident feedback, but I would argue this goes back to kind of the similar things that we had with RTAC. If we're not going to take RTAC recommendations when it comes to transportation because they're residents, why are we deferring to planning commission to sort this out as opposed to starting with staff and making recommendations?
Mayor Wilson.
Clarification. Excellent point, Sarah, but let me just be clear on the RTAC. It wasn't that we wouldn't take recommendations from the RTAC. It was that the RTAC would not follow the recommendations of the mayor and council of which issues to work on. Happy to follow the recommendations of the RTAC. As a matter of fact, we still did and will. And there's still some things we're following that the RTAC recommended. The challenge for us, what I understood from our perspective and mine, was we couldn't get RTAC to work specifically on the things that we desired them to work on. And so there was always that rub, like, hey, we're going to work on this. Guys, we really would like you to work on this. So fair point. But I think on this point, we were saying, okay, planning commission, we would like you to work on ADUs, solve for that equation. Big task. One of the things, just as, I don't know, to not get too far in the weeds, one of the reasons I like this equation, this particular equation, is because it doesn't get us too far ahead of ourselves on the larger question of addressing the overall zoning code. So it's kind of compartmentalizing from a test perspective. Can residents who are highly involved, highly activated, and the other thing I'd say, talking to the question in terms of the staff talent of community development, I think they're overwhelmed. I think they want the help. I think they'd love to have the help on the ADUs. That's just my 2 cents of it. Jason hasn't said that, but that's my sense of it. And I don't want to speak for them, but I think they'd love to have the help.
We have a motion and we do have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right. All opposed? All right, thank you, duly noted. All right, thank you. Item number 2 as listed under community development, consideration of Tree Bank Fund Administration FY 2024 project list. Ms. Bromberg.
Good afternoon. Give me one moment. Let me get my file open for you. So in your packet, you have an explanation of the code language in the UDC, which refers to the donations that are made to the Tree Bank Fund. Just as a reminder, these funds come from tree removal permits that are obtained by anyone in the city to remove trees. Those funds are collected through the permitting process and go into the Tree Bank Fund. The code specifically indicates that they are for the sole purpose of planting and maintaining trees and other applicable landscaping for the public benefit on public property, or it could also be private property within a public easement. And so what we do on an annual basis is bring a project list to you through committee and then on to council for approval, taking a look at what funds we do have available. Each of the departments does provide some projects. The past couple of years, we've had a couple of departments who haven't. Also in your packet, just for your information, is the fiscal 23 project list, which includes, it should be the second part of your attachments on page, well, it was 11. I'm not sure if that changed with the addendum that came out today. Those are thank you. Those are the expenses that have been paid out this past fiscal year from those project approvals. There was a total of just under $150,000 that was spent out across the year, with a total of about $112,000 by Rec and Parks, a little over $30,000 by transportation, and environmental community development for the Arbor Day project spent a little over $6,000. The remaining projects that have been unspent, most of those you're going to see again on the fiscal 24 request for project approval list, which I'm going to step through with you now. The first one on the list is the Admin Grants Program. This is the tree planting partnership program. This is where the city does a matching program, for example, with an HOA who may have some common property and they'd like to do a tree planting project on that. That's a project line item that has been available for a number of years and gets used on a periodic basis. We do have a smaller budget request for Arbor Day this coming year, not hoping to do as big a scale as we did last year. For EPW, we have the transfer station design. Just because of timing on that project, they have continued to move the planting request out. It is still a planting project they would like to complete. And then we've also got tree maintenance and installation near the water utility wellhead, tree maintenance at the recycle center, and then there's also a removal project associated with the water quality project here at City Hall. Fire and police did not request any projects this year.
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Wilson.
Lenore, is it your intent to go through every item listed on the tree bank?
Just the next few, just to give a taste of them, and there's a project that was added that I want to make sure we publicly talk about.
Okay, and then just a request as you get to that. So just
Yes.
let everybody know, you had $600,000 in the tree bank fund, FY23. You spent $149,000. The committee needs to know that these projects, the money did not get spent on, they need to approve if they get carried over.
Correct.
So the committee needs to know that clearly. And the second thing is that I would request, Randy, from senior leadership, from all department heads, that all these projects in conjunction with the committee and the council, is that these projects be prioritized. So one of the things when we're going through the list is, let's make a prioritization of the things that we believe the people want in the order that they want them.
All right.
Thank you for that. So Rec and Parks, as you mentioned, they do have a number of projects that were approved in 23. They are asking that those be brought forward to fiscal 24, and those include a bunch of park entrances, as you see listed here, as well as the dog park and the old Roswell Cemetery tree planting. As Mayor Wilson alluded to, they aren't automatically rolled over to the next fiscal year. We do a new approval of them to make sure we validate that those projects are still going to remain on the list. And then for transportation, they do have a new project, the new project for Rec and Parks is Maple Street, tree and shrub planting along the multi-use trail connection. And then for transportation, they also had a project to carry forward on Canton Street. And then they also have a new project request along Fraser Street where the city detention pond, it's here behind City Hall, the wall faces Fraser Street, and so there's a screening project recommended there. So as the mayor mentioned, last year we had $600,000 in allocation. This year it's $648,000 available in the tree bank fund. There was a question asked of me when we were reviewing the project list about how much money comes in on an annual basis to this, and just for your information, I thought I would share that. It does vary from year to year. This past year we had just over $200,000, $213,000 come into the fund. In '22, it was just over 200,000. In '21, it was just over 100,000, but in 2020, we didn't even have 50,000. So it does vary from year to year. In the earlier years, we had very small amounts, and then it grew, usually associated with larger developments that were coming in. Then we had kind of a decline in that, and then the rest of that's just been kind of standard tree removal projects that have continued along. So, as the mayor mentioned, one of the things that we would like to recommend the department heads do is we have the projects funded through your approval, but we come back and bring to you a prioritization of the order that they would prefer to complete those in at another committee meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Bromberg? Councilmember Beeson.
Was previously asked and discussed with the mayor, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, I think he was okay with it, the possible consideration to take some of these funds to use for invasive species removal, like kudzu, English ivy, privet, so that we can actually free up some space to plant some more of these trees in the event that we have enough funds on hand to fund our additional projects. Just wanted to put that out there for the group for their consideration.
Councilmember Palermo.
So I'm a strong believer that we need to be investing in removing invasives, and in fact, actually, in the budget last year, so the fiscal 2023, which we passed in June of 2022, did involve providing resources that Mr. Leatherman had mentioned were available to help remove the invasives, to better utilize the river trails, as well as obviously all the environmental benefits. So I'm a strong believer that this mayor and council needs to prioritize that, and I'm glad that we've invested in it with staff back in 2022. That being said, my concern with the tree fund is the tree fund, really the original aspect of it, it was truly to be planting more trees, and frankly more now through something that we passed a few years ago, more truly native trees, but truly for planting. And the concern was the creep of having the money not used for planting more. So I guess that's where I feel like two very noble goals, but we should be investing actual money and actual resources into this removing the invasive priority. And I'm really concerned with the fact that when people are paying into the tree fund, it's because they're cutting down more trees. And if we're not replanting them and we're using up money that we should be doing at a greater rate, because without a doubt we have, frankly, a lot of money in here, which is concerning, which means a lot of people have been cutting down trees and we've not been replacing them at an appropriate rate. And I'm just concerned if we're taking more things from it, then that will continue to be losing some treescape without actually replacing it. So that's my hesitation, knowing that I fully support that we need to remove more invasives. Does that make sense on kind of the concern? Because in the past, staff had requested to use it for more maintenance type aspects that were further and further away from planting more. So that's, I guess, where my hesitation is.
Mayor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. A question, and Lenore, we may not be prepared to answer this tonight, but I think, Randy, we probably do need to answer this as a city, and it kind of piggybacks on Michael's comments, which is, so outside of 2020, which was COVID, straight out, which was $50,000, 100, then 200, then 220, I think it was. Last year, we spent $149,000. So we need to express to ourselves and to our community some clarity about, obviously not how much money we're receiving, but how much we're spending, and what exactly the money's being spent on, because to Mike's point, we don't keep up with what we spend, which is not necessarily a bad thing if it's intentional and planned. And so probably just get clarity on what we're actually spending that $149,000 on, and if our desire was perhaps we went and intended to spend $250,000 last year, but we couldn't. And so if we couldn't, why couldn't we? So I think we probably need to get a little clearer on operationally,
Sure.
more than just what we're spending, but how it's getting executed, and if there's some challenges to that execution.
Right. I certainly can speak to how much was spent in the different categories, because we do track that. Every single invoice or requisition that comes through, we track, and there's an approval process, so we have a log. That's how I can get the $149,317 that were spent, and I have that split out by project. As far as the prioritization and the ability to be able to get more planting done, I would have to defer to the department heads as to why their projects weren't able to happen this past year and get spent. And I think there's a different reason for every single one of them.
No, that's a really good point, and I think to your point, so we need clear prioritization, right? And the prioritization probably should be made with the senior department heads and the respective liaison from the council, so there's everybody's conjoined. And then the second part of that, so the priorities can come before senior leadership and the council again for a decision about how the money is going to be spent. But then once the decision for the money spent is, we need to have clarity, can we actually spend that money? Are we going to execute on those priorities? And I think that's, if we're going to have a tree bank, we need to know, are we going to execute on it? Not just, hey, it's a cool thing to have, but like, well, you want to do that, you want to do that, you want to do that, you want to do that. So we're going to do those in FY24, right? And so next year when we get together, here's all the products, here's the projects, here's the prioritized, here's how we knocked them out, here's the timetables. Boom, we succeeded.
Okay. Councilmember Hall.
A couple of different comments and points. So on the invasive removal, I know that EPW and transportation both do quite a bit of that, and I don't know that it's a particularly line item budget, but they do have funds and they are taking care of invasives from those departments and maybe even other departments. And my second point is, it seems that we have a horticulturist coming up now. I wonder if a tree bank can be relocated to somebody that's specifically looking at trees or horticulture. I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea.
No, thank you. Councilmember Beeson.
Just wanted to quickly clarify my point. I wasn't referencing being able to reallocate these funds into exclusively removing invasives. So for example, you have an area that's covered in privet, we're just gonna clear it and use those funds, but specifically to clear space for a tree. So when you do a replanting, that actually will take up the space, the root ball will not allow other invasives to go down, as opposed to your point, we do obviously budget for invasive species removal, just more so clearing some space so that we can get a lot more of these trees planted.
Thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
And that's where, again, I think the goal we're in complete alignment with. So without a doubt, excuse me, just had these almonds. So, so we both want to, I believe we both, and actually believe this whole council, since I appreciate the funding from 2022 for the resources, but without a doubt, we should be removing more invasives and replacing it with trees. And to replace it with the trees, it should come from this. It's just my concern is I feel the resources we should be using to remove those invasives should not come from the $648,000, because that means that's less money that we're getting citywide to replace the tree canopy. So I believe that, and I never want to speak for anyone else on this council, but I believe this whole council absolutely supports and wants to remove more invasives, replace that with trees, and the only discussion is where should the money come from? And my thing is, I believe the $648,000 should be focused truly more on the tree, and we have other resources and other funds and other, frankly, staff members that were added in the last year or so, knowing that a part of what they'd be doing is removing invasives. So I think that's just where the one piece is where that money comes from.
All right, thank you. There were a couple of, obviously, takeaways from discussion related to the staff and what we need to bring back to council in ways of in terms of information. Are we, any further discussion? Let me ask that question. Okay. All right. Do we have any motion at this point? Motion to move this forward. Okay. All right. Motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. Under transportation. Under transportation, item number 3, consideration of a memorandum of understanding between the Georgia Department of Transportation and the City of Roswell, Georgia, for the utility adjustments work on the State Road 400 Managed Lanes project. It's Mr. Littlefield and Mr. Cox.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A little background on this, the need for an MOU. The GDOT SR 400 Express Lane project will construct express lanes spanning approximately 16 miles along State Route 400, which is right through Holcomb Bridge Road, straight through Roswell. So the MOU will help. Let me just continue reading. Sorry. The project includes changes to the infrastructure within the city of Roswell, including the conversion of the interchange of Holcomb Bridge Road and SR 400 into a diverging diamond interchange. Additionally, the project involves the installation of 2 new traffic signals for the connection of Raintree Crossing to Old Dogwood Road and for the integration with the express lane facilities along SR 400. The project will affect telecommunication infrastructure, street lighting, sanitary sewer, storm drainage systems, and certain traffic signal facilities in the city of Roswell. Due to these adverse effects mentioned above, it is necessary for the city to enter into a memorandum of understanding with GDOT and its developer. The formal agreement serves to establish clear delineation for responsibilities for the design and construction of the utility adjustment work associated with the project. In the MOU, specific provisions have also been included to outline the desired upgrades to the utility installations. These enhancements encompass the upgrade of impacted traffic signals to either mast arms or metal strain poles, along with the installation of flashing yellow arrow traffic signals. Staff is seeking approval to sign the MOU with GDOT encompassing both design and construction aspects. What this means is GDOT and its developer, with this MOU, will be able to design, do subsurface utility engineering, and also pay for the relocation of such utilities. So that's probably the most important part. The financial impact of this MOU is nothing unless the city wants a betterment. So if we want something bigger and better than what's already out there, then we would enter into a betterment agreement with GDOT and its developer. But this MOU to relocate existing utilities, relocate mast arm signals does not cost anything to the city of Roswell. It would be solely paid for by GDOT and its developer. All right. So staff recommendation is to approve the MOU with GDOT, and we'll take any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Mayor Wilson.
Jeff, just one question. Is there any additional MOUs will be signed with the developer separately? With the developer separately, not with GDOT, but with the developer separately?
If we request a betterment, such as, say, we had a water line on the facility that was 4 inches and we wanted to upgrade it to, say, a 6 or 8 inch, we would end up paying the difference, but that would be a separate agreement. The terms would have to be agreed to by the city of Roswell and the developer.
Now, GDOT has separate agreements with the developer, obviously, correct? So but when we sign an agreement with GDOT, we're signing really an agreement with GDOT and the developer.
So it's both, but GDOT is our basic liaison, so to speak, but they're working solely through the developer who will be paying for the project, basically.
Thank you, sir.
Project.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
A question along this corridor, are all of the underground, or utilities that could be buried already buried in this area? Are there any above ground power lines?
And if we propose to do buried utilities that are aerial, that would probably be considered a betterment.
Probably or will be?
We would have to enter into just negotiations with GDOT, but more than likely, if it's an additional cost, it would be considered a betterment. And we would have to review any plans, so the developer will do the subsurface utility engineering, create the plans, we would review the plans, and then we would have an opportunity to critique the plans, make revisions, and we would back and forth like that. But if we want a true betterment, then we would be in negotiations with what the difference in the cost would be.
And this allows for that potential negotiation, correct?
Yes, this allows them to do the subsurface utility locations, prepare the plans, and pay for the plans, and also do the construction.
Understood, thank
It's
you.
almost like an encroachment agreement with us as opposed to. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Councilmember Morthland.
I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this or not, but in this area that we're talking about, is there fiber already laid for communication?
We spoke with our traffic engineer, and we do have fiber along 400 and in other locations, yes.
So it's
Throughout-
already there.
Through the area we think that they're going to touch, but we don't know the full area, what they're going to touch until we see the plan, which probably won't be fully developed until sometime after the contract's actually awarded.
Yeah. I know in several neighborhoods, fiber is going in right now, and obviously if the ground is already disturbed and it's a potential to go in, let's ask that they go ahead and do that, get it in. That was my only question.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make note in the plan.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Beeson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 4, consideration of a transportation bond project list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, good evening. Just a quick recap of the bond program to date. Last November, the voters of Roswell approved 3 bond referendums. One of them included $107 million to fund various recreation and parks elements, as well as some bike and pedestrian improvements across the city, which accounted for approximately $20 million for the bike ped improvements. As of the summer, we've allocated $5 million to the bond issuance, and we're eager to get started. And we wanted to recap some of the projects that we've been working with our stakeholders after reviewing the bike ped master plan from 2019, our sidewalk gap matrix, as well as any of the committed projects we have through our T-SPOS programs or anything that GDOT is implementing. Here is a draft list of projects. I'll be glad to go over each one of these individually, or I could just come up with some of the highlights. One of the big ones is on the east side of Roswell. This is the Old Alabama Road corridor, basically from the Big Creek Park. Heading east over towards Willow Springs, towards the city of Johns Creek. It would stop at Roxburgh Drive at that traffic signal there. The other projects include Eatrice Road up near Sweet Apple Elementary School. Riverside Road on the east side, also that's not a multi-use trail, that is just a bridge over the creek. If you're familiar with Riverside Road near Martin's Landing, the creek that flows out of their dam, there's not a pedestrian bridge or path on the south side of the roadway. For some of the council members who were part of the Bond Roadshow last autumn when we had the meeting at Martin's Landing, that was a concern that they had over there, that residents had spoken up to about pedestrian access along the river corridor. King Road, this is a small piece, so we're trying to plug a gap on near Roswell High School. If the council recalls, we just issued the construction contract for a multi-use trail in front of the public shopping center near Highway 92 and Woodstock Road that would put a new multi-use trail in front of the Publix. This would continue that up to Hardscrabble Road and link it to existing multi-use trail up there. We also, I'm skipping around here, so please forgive me. One of the other projects there is Hardscrabble Road heading west from King Road, going over towards the Super Target, going over towards Whittingham Place. And this would also connect with the T-SPOS project that would ultimately link everything in Canton Street. I have a map to show you here just in a few moments. It'll kind of put all this together. One of the other big projects is Oxbow Road, adding new multi-use path to the Oxbow Road corridor, and we tried to implement some kind of traffic calming measures along with this project. We also have a handful of sidewalk gap listed below. These are just a handful of ones from around the city. Most of them are up in the northern part of the city near Hembry Road. Those are 2 that link to Hembry Park. They also link to the 2 public schools up there, Elkins Point and Hembry Springs Elementary. Also, we have one on Chafin Road as well. It's been requested several times by our residents because it's kind of the back entrance to Roswell High School, and it's pretty easy to build. And again, I'll show you a map of these locations in just a few moments. Here's a couple of pictures of the highlights that I mentioned. You can see Riverside Road, that's the one by Martin's Landing. You can see the pedestrian path just randomly ends, and you have to venture out into the roadway, into the bike lanes. Old Alabama on the right. The right side of the picture is the north side. There's a lot of right-of-way over there. Old Alabama Road has one of the wider right-of-way swaths in the city. So we would like to put a multi-use trail there if we can get funding approved. And then also on Norcross Street, out over here, over near the public library, just not far from City Hall. We've had a lot of complaints from the residents in this area that they can't safely access Canton Street There's a sidewalk on the other side of the road that's very accessible, but they can't get to it, just due to the traffic volumes in Northcroft. It's very unsafe to cross. So these are just a couple of the highlights. Here is the map that kind of illustrates it a little bit better. I know there's a lot of different colors on this map, so bear with me. I want you to focus on the green and the red. So the green are the trails that I showed on that list earlier. The old Alabama on the east side being a big component of that. And what's significant is if you look at the orange dotted lines, those are T-SPOS projects that contain some bike ped elements. And why it's significant is if we could get this funded and implemented and tie into our other T-SPOS projects on the river and on Old Alabama Road, we would basically have a coast-to-coast, east-west multi-use path across the city going that way. It would also link to the Big Creek Parkway, or the Big Creek Greenway, which links, the multi-use trail northward up into Alpharetta into Forsyth County. So it'd be a nice addition to the system. And then, as I mentioned before, you can see Woodstock Road there with the dashed orange linking up to King Road and Hardscrabble. And that dark blue line there on Hardscrabble is an existing multi-use trail. So we're trying to piece together the different parts of our network. And then the red are the 4 sidewalk gaps I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of where this slide kind of puts all these pieces together, linking our various assets when we think they complement our T-SPOS program rather nicely. So in closing, just the financial impact, if this is approved in any form or fashion, we'll coordinate with the finance department to see what we can accelerate, what projects we could expedite to get concept PE going immediately. And then staff will welcome any questions or comments on the list. So, thank you.
Mayor Wilson.
I'd like to congratulate, obviously, Jeff and Dave and their team, and I'd like to congratulate my colleagues on the council. This is probably the biggest political defeat I have experienced internally amongst us, where you guys basically taken me by the shirt collar and thrown me to the ground and said, this is what we're doing. But I congratulate you. I think it's a great plan. You know, I have a different plan, but I think this is a great plan for the city, and I congratulate you guys on your wisdom.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton, and Mayor Wilson, thank you for your grace. What I will say, and is interesting, I just did the math because I wasn't sure exactly, but unlike another potential plan, which would have been 100% in one part of the city, what's interesting is even though if you look at number of projects, there was certainly a big variation, but if you looked at cost, I just did the math and saw that this split between the east side and the west side ends up being 49.1%, and so really close to 50-50, really spread through the city, and definitely a lot of things that we've seen ranked high on the sidewalk gap list for a long time. The Riverside one, I actually wasn't sure how, I knew that was on the list through the bike ped master plan. I wasn't sure how you were going to do it, but I do run there on occasion, and it is certainly, there was not a lot of space, so thank you for showing the picture on how that would get done. But I think this is just exciting that in a lot of different parts throughout the city of just really bringing a lot more pedestrian safety, and with the way our sidewalk matrix works, the fact that it looks with the rankings based on proximity to a school, to a park, to public transportation, to certain, I forget some of the other factors, and obviously the bike ped master plan, which staff did an absolutely great job of constantly being out there. So Mr. Littlefield, you weren't here during that process, but Mr. Cox and many others from transportation were spending nights, weekends, going to different events, having a little tent, getting really feedback from residents and walking through that bike ped master plan, which took a lot of work and a lot of involvement from the city. So I'm just excited that after for so long of not really making that much progress on either the bike ped master plan or the sidewalk gap list, that we have the opportunity to really fill in some large gaps that ranked high that don't already have construction coming. So obviously, if within our code, if a developer is going to build something, they're required to put in the sidewalk, and so obviously these are places that aren't having development go on right now, and certainly have had gaps for a long time. So I think this is great, and again, love that it's both the east side and the west side.
Councilmember Beeson.
Could you go back to the maps list, or the maps image? So the gold dashes, T-SPOS, GDOT with sidewalk of multi-use trail elements, are those already approved projects, or those projects in the works? What are those?
So the orange dashes are either the GDOT project, which is primarily the Highway 9 corridor here in the Historic District, and the majority of the others are Roswell T-Splosh projects that have some bike ped elements.
Does that mean that they're happening, or they're in the works, or?
They have committed funds. They're T-Splosh projects that we have funding committed for that's in this 5-year plan. And some of them are actually from the previous T-Splosh.
Because a point of concern that I have is, I was just over at Roswell Fire Labs today, right in front of that establishment on the eastbound side of Holcomb Bridge Road, there's no sidewalk, and there is public transit that serves there, and you can see goat paths, which is where you can see people commonly use the area. The grass is eroded away. There's no sidewalk servicing that area at all. So potentially in future list of priorities, could we make sure that that's moved up a little higher? And then I don't see at all, I might be mistaken, Crabapple Road, which does connect several schools as well as a park, maybe two parks, actually. There's a lack of sidewalk connectivity there, stretching from Sweet Apple Elementary / Park, coming down Crabapple Road, all the way to almost right before you hit Highway 92. There's no sidewalk at all on either side of the road. So are those ever going to be in the works as well?
So they are listed in our sidewalk gap matrix, which is a very long list, front and back. And yes, you are correct. Right here, you can see there's no blue there, right just south of Hembry Road. That is one of the areas where there are no sidewalks on either side. I know there's a parcel there with a little pond on it that's been rumored to be ripe for development. One reason we don't like to target certain areas is because we know a developer is going to move in and likely build, and they have to build sidewalks. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game with, we don't want to invest dollars when a developer could be 6 to 12 months away from investing and putting the sidewalks in for free for us.
And then rip it back up again.
But I agree, that is one of the thorns in our side, is right there, that gap. Because there are sidewalks up and down.
There's a sidewalk on the hill, but there's not a sidewalk on the
Yes.
Parker School side, which,
Right.
no offense, makes no sense because there's no crosswalk.
There's north of Hembry Road, you're right, there's a great little sidewalk up on the hill. It's a nice pleasant walk because you're away from the traffic. The western side of Hardscrabble is very wooded, and it'd be very challenging to put a sidewalk in there.
Correct. And then I guess when you get down to the Crabapple, Hembry Road intersection, there's no crosswalk. It's just a point of concern for me, especially given the fact that we talked about, or as Councilmember Palermo mentioned, if we're trying to prioritize areas that are serviced by public transit, like Holcomb Bridge, or areas that are service parks and schools, which is Crabapple Road, in my mind, moving forward, those should be higher in consideration. But I am good with this list.
Councilmember Hall, I believe, saw first, yeah. Councilmember Hall?
Thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out to Councilmember Palermo. This is for 8 years. This has been his vision to make Roswell a walkable city, and he has been prioritizing sidewalks, working on sidewalk matrix, helping develop a lot of this and how to tie this together. And I can't tell you how excited I am seeing this. And I do love the potential future loop that perhaps Senator Ossoff will help us get it funded, like he got the Beltline funded. So, but this is really, really terrific. Thank you, guys. I'm tickled. I can't tell you how excited I am about it.
Councilmember Palermo?
I appreciate that, Councilmember Hall. I think the big accomplishment was certainly when there was bond discussions, I obviously was advocating that there should be money going to sidewalks. We hear that request so much. I obviously wish it could be more than $20 million because I certainly agree with Councilmember Beeson. I want to see a lot more sidewalks, and I'm really hoping that this council will continue to add to a sidewalk fund and look at that each budget year and just make sure we are hitting it. Even just the fact that 20 million, which is a very large number, ultimately the success was when voters decided they did want to approve that bond. And then at the same time, obviously seeing that $20 million doesn't get us nearly as many sidewalks as we'd like, doesn't even get us a full loop or anything like that, but just making progress in the right direction, I'm very happy about. And then just again, really hoping that each year you will look at giving additional money to a sidewalk fund, which we certainly have, and want to see that continue to be contributed to. Separately, it would obviously be outside the scope of this discussion, but another point was brought up that I completely agree with. I think a separate thing is we should look at a sidewalk and specifically potentially a flashing beacon. And so definitely I think Crabapple is a great opportunity for that. As I've mentioned, I have the viewpoint, I want to see more of those all over the city. And I think without a doubt, and that Crabapple area is a great place for one. But again, I want to see more of those all over the city, which is why we made it easier to request. But also we should be proactive and make sure that when we're not getting requests, we're still thinking about where they can go and how we can just increase pedestrian safety.
Councilmember Hills.
Coming, okay. Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I also like this list a lot. Sorry, Mayor, but not sorry. The part I'm most excited about is how a lot of this is coming together at the same time. So we've got T-Splosh, GDOT money that will complement what we're putting in through bond money, particularly along our riverfront, and then coming up Old Alabama and over into the northern east end of Roswell. That large green span there on the right side of the map is connecting Willow Springs even in. And, you know, we've been hearing from them for 18 months about sidewalks. And a lot there will improve what's available on foot or on easy wheels instead of motorized. Maybe, you know, obviously golf carts would be available as well. But I think this opens up a whole new avenue of accessibility and what's to come and being built over there, not to mention what we're doing on the river. Will just open up an entirely new area. So I had somebody ask last week, and I'm sitting in a different seat now than I would have been 2 years ago, but I had somebody say, oh my gosh, we passed the bond in November, why don't we have a parking deck in downtown Roswell? And it's the same thing with this. I see all this on the map, and I'm ready. I'm ready to go, and it just takes time to get all these things in order, and it's just the reality of it. But we're going to have so much going off at the same time, which will be a little headache. You know, we'll have a strategic plan about what goes first and consecutively, but we're going to have a massive overhaul that comes in one fell swoop. Alpharetta wasn't built in a day. Woodstock wasn't built in a day. Milton wasn't built in a day. And we're retrofitting a lot of things here and trying to make as many people happy as possible. So I feel like this is a great, big start to where we're going to have some very fruitful and visible changes to the better for our residents really soon. So I'm pleased with this.
Councilmember Beeson.
One hopefully quick clarifying question. I remember, this was before I was elected, it was sometime last year, y'all collectively had a conversation in committee, I watched the live stream, about, I thought it was multi-use trails from the entrance of Big Creek Park. You guys had a discussion about if you wanted it meandering, if you wanted it alongside the road, something, trees, trade-offs. Was that not approved during that meeting, that design, or was the funding just not approved for that?
So we have the funding and design underway for a part of that green line. So from Big Creek Park over to Wooten Road, which is the turnoff to the elementary school there on the north side, that's being designed now. And with any luck, now that we have construction funding, assuming this is approved as is, we could expedite that fairly quickly. We'd have the bond money available to use for construction while we're already designing part of it. So we'd likely break it up into 2 phases. So Wooten Road West, it could be done quickly. Going east out to Willow Springs, we'd have to do the design and start that kind of as a phase 2.
Okay, so phase 1 is already funded though, for the design and engineering, I suppose.
Yes.
But this goes towards the construction all the way to the entrance to, was it on Old Alabama or all the way to the entrance of Willow Springs? It was Roxburgh, right?
For the bond, it goes to Roxburgh.
Okay.
But for the design we have underway, it stops at Wooten.
Got it. So it was not previously funded out from the Big Creek Park entrance.
Correct.
Got it. Thank
Just
you.
the design on part of it.
Design only. Okay.
Councilmember Morthland.
Big fan of the list, so great work here. But just so we're all on the same page, after these projects are funded, what's left in the bond? What dollar amount's left over after that?
But the dollar amount with these projects, about 6 to 7 million.
Okay, just want to put that out there. Thanks.
All right, thank Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. I will second Councilmember Hill.
No, I will second you, Councilmember Palermo.
Motion by Councilmember
You'll be making the motion
Palermo.
at council anyways.
Motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5, presentation of the T-SPLOST program quarterly update.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. So earlier this spring, back in March and April, the council wanted to start doing a quarterly update for our T-SPLOST program. So this is our first iteration. We're going to briefly go through the T-SPLOST 1 and T-SPLOST 2 projects, and we'll definitely be able to answer any questions moving forward. But just to quickly recap, the T-SPLOST program is the 3/4 sales tax that is funded or was voted on by Fulton County voters. This is every city in Fulton County minus Atlanta. They have their own tax. This tax has been in place since 2016 when the voters initially voted for it. That first iteration was from April 2017 to March of 2022. However, the voters renewed the vote in November of 2021, so we're in the second iteration. Staff commonly call this T-SPLOST 2. So if I put up the numbers that we raised from the first round of T-SPLOST, it was around $85 million for Roswell, and that was about an average of $1.4 million per month. And just as a reminder to the audience, when T-SPLOST is passed, we don't just get a big bag of money slid across the table to us, and $85 million. It slowly accumulates, kind of like a bank account. You get about a little over $1 million per month, and it accumulates over 5 years or 60 months. So in T-SPLOST 2, the revenues have improved. We're averaging around $1.6 million per month, and that money is currently accumulating. And we have almost $23 million accumulated thus far for the T-SPLOST 2 iteration. So here's just a quick recap of T-SPLOST 1. I'm going to go through those few projects first, then we'll get into T-SPLOST 2. Again, this is from the initial T-SPLOST that was voted on in 2016. The Oxbow Road intersection project, we're wrapping that up now. We're just doing a final few punch list items for the construction. But as you know, it was substantially completed and open to traffic just a few weeks ago, back on June 30th. We also completed the Rucker Road Complete Street project just during the COVID years, during 2021, and that was just over $2 million. That's up off Rucker Road, just east of Howes Road, heading into Alpharetta. Here's a couple other projects we're still tracking. The Big Creek Parkway, we've spent a little bit over $5 million on this so far in preliminary engineering and design activities. We're hoping to wrap that up in 2025. The reason this has been paused is primarily because we've been working extensively with GDOT on their Express Lane project. As they are the owners of the 400 corridor, we have to cross over that, and we had to work out an agreement to get over that and get permission to cross it to build the bridge. If you recall, the Mayor and Council approved an IGA, or intergovernmental agreement, with GDOT that was just recently executed here just the past 2 weeks. We just got it back from GDOT, I think last week, a signed copy. This would give GDOT's developer permission to build the bridge on our behalf as we paid a financial contribution for that. So now that that milestone has been reached, we can start moving forward with the rest of the project, as GDOT will be building the bridge over the expressway, and Roswell will be responsible for the approaches, the roads leading up to that. So we're very eager to start to get moving now that this major hurdle is out of the way. This is a bridge replacement. This is the old Holcomb Bridge Road. This is just west of Dogwood. There is a small bridge there. We spent about $25,000 on this a few years ago. We basically paid to put sensors on the bridge to see if it could be prolonged or deferred maintenance. The ratings actually came in pretty good on that. However, it still does require attention, and we're continuing to track that. It's currently rolled into the concept for the Big Creek Parkway, but we're going to be having more discussions on how we can approach that very soon, now that we got the IGA with GDOT, and how we move forward on next steps. This is the interchange at Georgia 400 to Holcomb Bridge Road. If many of you, I don't think were on council at the time, but this was originally a T-SPLOST 1 project. We had committed $15 million, or actually, I'm sorry, it was a couple $2 or $3 million for T-SPLOST 1 to do the engineering for GDOT to start the efforts to replace that interchange. Later in 2019, there were efforts to help do an agreement with GDOT to fund that for an amount of $15 million, and we've been paying annual installments to them. Currently, it's about 4.3 we've paid so far. And we pay that annually to GDOT, so they will rebuild the interchange as part of a divergent as part of their express lane project. The SR9 or State Route 9 Historic Gateway on South Atlanta Street in the Historic District, that also was a T-SPOS 1 project. It had about $3 million allocated to it in T-SPOS funds originally. We've only spent a small part of that, about $250,000 to date on various design activities. We still have a couple things we have to work out. One of them is we do have to provide matching funds to the ARC federal dollars we got a few years ago as part of the, when we requested funds through them. If you recall, they awarded us $8 million in federal funds for the Gateway project, but we have to provide the 20% local match. So the city has to come up with local funds in an amount of $2 million to get that federal grant. And that was part of the agreement we worked out with GDOT as they helped fund right away, and they're continuing to work with us on the construction of the project. That'll be moving forward in the upcoming years. We're currently still tracking right away with GDOT as they're acquiring that, and we'll be working on final design on the project moving forward. And the construction will start once those items are approved. There's some environmental approvals we're anticipating getting later this year. So there'll be some next steps approaching on this, and we'll be sure to keep the mayor and council updated. So moving into T-SPOS 2, this is the November 2021 referendum. Here's kind of a map of all the overviews. I just want to stress one thing to the mayor and council and the audience. These letters are randomly assigned. They have no indication of priority. That's a question we commonly get. They think Project A is way more important than Project H. That's not the case. These are just randomly assigned letters, and I'll quickly go through these one by one, starting alphabetically. So Riverside Road, this project's gotten a lot of activity last year. We've been working on that for design. We've spent about $128,000 to date. We also had some local funds that the mayor and council provided in previous years to help accelerate the design and concept work. So that gave us a big leg up heading into the design activities. So we're anticipating wrapping up design around the holidays this year, and we could probably start right away early in the new year, January or February. So that'll be a major milestone to get that project going as we work with our Rec and Parks Department on their various interests down there and their projects. So we're really excited with the partnership here. And the project remains on schedule and on budget. Project B, this is the Grimes Bridge Road corridor and the Dogwood Road corridor, the linking the river corridor up to Holcomb Bridge, and then linking Grimes Bridge, looking at various improvements from Oxbow headed east towards Holcomb Bridge and Dogwood. We haven't spent any money on this yet, just because we have to get some, they've invoiced some local funds that we had on this project. We expect an invoice to come in very soon, so that $0 amount spent will change pretty quickly. But we're still working on concept development, and we've been working with our stakeholders to determine what the concept will ultimately be. We had some good public meetings earlier this summer or late spring on the project, so we've got the summary of those comments, and we're working through that to determine how we're going to move forward on the concept of that project. Nesbitt Ferry, this is a project that's being led by the city of Johns Creek. They're handling the concept and design work. They are actually covering the bulk of the project cost. If you recall, Roswell's only providing $1 million, or about 12% of the project total, but it totals about $8.5 million. We understand that they're having a public meeting probably late summer, August, probably around Labor Day in September, so that we should have a good grasp on what they're proposing concept-wise for the Nesbitt Ferry corridor, the Nesbitt Ferry Road corridor, which will likely improve some, turn lane improvements, some operational improvements, and most of all, on the Roswell side, we definitely have some sidewalk gaps we would really like filled over there to help some of our citizens on Nesbitt Ferry Road. Moving into the Pine Grove Road corridor, we actually just got the consultant on board to start the design and concept work, so we're really excited about that. That was a big milestone for this area of town. There's actually two segments here. Project D is basically the corridor from Mimosa heading over to Lake Charles, and we've already started the traffic data collection. I think we got that in before school let out, so we got some new traffic data, and we'll continue working with our stakeholders on developing the concept and needs for that as we get closer to the holidays. Same thing here. This is the continuation of the project. This is the part closer out towards Cobb County, Lake Charles over to the Cobb County line. Again, it's looking at a variety of improvements, anything from intersection improvements to multi-use trails and sidewalks at various locations. So that's the same as the previous project. I'm skipping a little bit, skipping a letter, so I'm gonna talk about F in a minute, because that's not an active project, but Project G, this is the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2. That, I kind of talked about that during the T-Splost 1. We did have some funding, we have not spent any of this $5 million that was part of T-Splost 2. That, we'll be discussing that in depth in the weeks and months ahead after we get our concept, or sorry, excuse me, our preliminary engineering to design what our next steps are gonna be. So we're looking forward to doing that. Project H, this is the intersection projects up on Cox Road. There's actually two of them. One is at Cox Road and Etris, and another one at Cox Road and King Road. This is a project being led by the city of Milton. Again, it's a financial partnership. They are paying 3/4 of the cost, 75%. Roswell's paying 25%. They had public meetings about a month and a half ago, and I believe their city council will be reviewing the concepts and voting on them maybe as early as August. So hopefully before Labor Day weekend, we should have a good idea of what Milton is thinking, and we'll definitely share that information with the mayor and council. Some of the alternatives include turn lane improvements as well as roundabout options. The Norcross Street Bridge replacement, this is one of our older bridges in the city of Roswell that we're really seeking to get replaced as soon as possible. We have about $4.2 million assigned to this. We don't have anything spent to date because we just got it encumbered. Our consultant's working on it, so we should be seeing an invoice probably within the next week or two. So it is moving forward, and we are aware that the city does have the branding and aesthetics plan, so we will make sure that we'll be coordinating not only the bridge itself, but any lighting or concept things that we want included, that will be taken into account as we move forward. We also have a couple multi-use trails. I know we talked a few moments ago about the Old Alabama Road multi-use trail over on the east side. These are some of the other components that will link that to our larger network. So we actually have two projects here. I'll kind of talk through them both quickly. The projects K and J on the map, I have them highlighted there. This would basically create multi-use trails basically from the fire station at Market Boulevard on Old Alabama, heading north up to Big Creek Park. So this is one of the T-Spots projects that would get it basically connected from Big Creek Park down to the riverfront. So we've started the concept work, and the money's starting to be spent. We just got started on this in the past 60 days. Same thing here. This is basically the same project. We're kind of doing them tandemly together. I'm getting near the end. Woodstock Road, multi-use trail. This is one of the first ones we got started on. This is the multi-use trail that we planned from Canton Street going north up to Highway 92. I mentioned a few moments ago, we have other multi-use trail projects in the works going north that connect up to Roswell High School. And then with the bond funds, if they're ultimately approved, we could extend that up to Hardscrabble Road as well to link to other multi-use trails in that area. So we've spent about $339,000 to date, and we have about another $250 behind it encumbered. So we got some concept info back, and we're working on the design right now, and we're hoping to expedite next phases of this as soon as possible. So we're really excited to get this going. And then lastly, these are the 5 or so remaining projects. I have them highlighted on the map here on the right. These are the projects that are not currently active, but we're hoping to activate some of them in the near future, mainly because we want to let some of the revenue build up a little bit more since we're only into our second year of revenue collections. This is basically Old Ellis Road up by the UPS Center, Holcomb Bridge Road, multi-use trails, basically linking Eves Road, heading west towards Martin's Landing and up towards Holcomb Woods Parkway, kind of near the Boston Market. Where the fire labs are, the little maker's space area. So we were looking at doing some concept work on that in the near future. We have one off-system route, which is behind River Eves Elementary School. That's a project on the east side that will link some neighborhoods, we hope, to Eves Road and the elementary school there, not far from the post office. And then also we have some maintenance work that's been proposed along the river corridor. So I apologize, that was a lot of information to digest, but that was kind of our quarterly update. So if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer your questions. I can't breathe right now.
Good information for Mayor and Council and the public, of course. Councilmember Beeson.
First and foremost, thank you. That was incredibly helpful. I also do appreciate in that last slide seeing, again, that same section of Holcomb Bridge Road, that multi-use trail being included in there as well as the status update on that. I have a question. We've talked about Pine Grove Corridor a couple of times in the last few months. Is there any reason why that's broken up as 2 separate projects? like you talked about one section of the project and we're doing all of this. The next section is contiguous, it touches that project. It seems like it would be a continuation. Is there a reason why it's two projects as opposed to phases?
I'm trying to remember myself why that was broken up.
It's actually because originally that was not a part of staff's recommendation. So staff's recommendation, just from a funding standpoint with the T-Splost, was it was gonna be just the smaller part. And that's where Councilmember Hall had obviously been hearing a lot of feedback from all the different emails and phone calls we've been receiving since I first got on council. And so that's where there was the big public discussion of not just making it a smaller portion and having it go further. So I'm guessing that's why in their mind, they still kept it as two separate.
So was the original the Magnolia side?
The
Yes,
bike- the-
because that's part of the bike
Yes.
and master plan.
Right.
And
Bike-
the other part is not part of it.
Yes, that's
The
right.
bike ped plan recommended multi-use trail to Lake Charles.
Oh, okay.
Because that's about a mile from Canton Street. That was a logical walking distance. However, the bike ped plan also recommended sidewalks further out. But the concept we can work on and can include anything.
And what's the distance on those two projects combined-ish?
The Mimosa to Lake Charles is about a mile, and I think Lake Charles out to Cobb is probably a mile and a quarter, mile and a third.
Yeah, 'cause that dollar amount seems very high. I think the way it was broken up on there, it looks like it's a $7 million project, but it's really a $15 million project, right?
Yes, well, remember, there are intersection improvements included as well.
Okay.
So there, if enough funding allows, I mean, obviously, we're gonna tackle the bike ped needs, of course. But if funding allows, there's potentially 3 intersection improvements. One is at North Coleman. So we don't know if we're gonna put a traffic light there, turn lanes, roundabout, we're not sure. We're gonna review that. That's a critical need because there's no turn lanes there. Also, we want to look at if there's any improvements at Hightower and also at Shallowford.
You said look at, so it's not currently within that $15 million scope then?
It's in there, but we want to make sure we can do all 3.
Okay, got it.
Hoping to do at least 2.
Okay, understood, thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
So, and so yes, I'm definitely familiar that cost included the intersection improvements, not just the bike ped master plan or just bike ped improvements. That being said, knowing that this council has not finalized what type of intersection improvement, you mentioned 3. I just want to again remind just the constant focus that our goal is not to just speed up traffic from Cobb County, which obviously the issue and the concern is a safety aspect from when you're turning from North Coleman, turning left, or if on Pine Grove you're turning a left onto North Coleman, and certainly a stoplight would help solve that. A roundabout would solve that. The concern with adding additional lanes is that's also going to increase the ease for cut-through traffic and for speeding through from a lot of the discussions we've had. So I would definitely be very cautious of adding lanes on Pine Grove, but certainly needing to do something to increase the safety of Roswell residents at that very dangerous intersection.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, this was a presentation, so no action is needed. Next item, item number 6, consideration to abandon portion of public property located on the west side of roadway near 103 and 105 Spring Drive at the request of developer.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. This is a peculiar right-of-way issue along Spring Drive. You can see these little indentations. Forgive me, this is right off of Marietta Highway, State Route 120. You can see the town square there up at the upper right-hand corner. So there's a large development got put in right here on this corner, and that same developer is trying to develop this lot. And we found that there's these weird right-of-way things that protrude out. They don't really serve a public purpose. So staff were asked to look at this, and we concur that this could be abandoned. It does not serve a public use, so it could go through the process, assuming the appraisal's been done, which it has been, I understand, and we paid fair market value. So we have no objections to this.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, just want to remind anybody listening that if the city ever chooses to abandon right-of-way, it means we're paid the appraised value, so the taxpayer is paid for that property. I also want to stress that I am typically very against abandoning right-of-way and abandoning city property because for the possibility of the future needs. That being said, for this specific example, I'm very confident there is no potential possible need or use for it for the city, and I think it does make sense for the potential of hopefully making better yards, better development, and again, we have no use, so I absolutely support this.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I agree with Councilmember Palermo, and Councilmember Morthland and I actually went and visited that development. I was concerned when I was watching that area get cleared, how that would end up, and I'm really pleased with what they've done. And it's a net zero neighborhood with a lot of solar and neat bells and whistles, but it's also a very attractive and I think sellable and improvement to the area, so I agree. I will absolutely support this as well, and I don't see how that property could serve any better use.
Motion to move this forward?
All right, motion by Councilmember Palermo. Any further, or motion by Councilmember Palermo. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, item number 7, consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 18 entitled Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Mr. Michael Petty, the Assistant City Attorney.
Good evening, everybody. I am here to talk to you about special assessments tonight. So in your packet, you have a draft ordinance that my office drafted that would sort of develop some rules and authorize the city to issue special assessments, to levy them and collect them. So I guess the first point is, what is a special assessment? It is a tool that a city can use to help cover the cost of improvements on public property. So specifically, it would allow you to, any piece of property that is touching where the improvements are, so on the road, you can do an assessment and collect that money from the property owner. We have the power to do that already. It's a clause in our charter that says we have the ability to levy and provide for the collection of special assessments to cover the cost of public improvements. And that's under section 22037 of our charter. Now the issue is that under Georgia law, it says that you also have to have rules about how you do it. You have to have procedural safeguards. You have to be able to ensure constitutional rights and all of that about how you do it. So what we're proposing is a ordinance that actually just simply adopts the state law on special ordinance. So it's almost word for word from state law, and it lays out the process that you would have to go through if you wanted to do this. So this is not doing any special assessments right now. It is just laying out the rules to do it. I'm not going to get into a lot of the weeds about the ordinance, but just to sort of tell you how it would work is you would initially have to sort of identify what road you were going to do it on, what the improvements were going to be, and you would have to find a need that it was necessary to do that, and then you would have to advertise it so that citizens were aware of it and could object to it. It would come back before you after that period of time for you to consider again, and then at that point you could adopt an ordinance which would provide for the design and for essentially doing the improvements and levying the assessment on the people, the property owners there. The ordinance goes through how you would do that. You would appoint a body that would essentially go look at the property and divide it up. It's based on sort of the frontage of how much property is on the private road, or the public road. So it goes through how you would do that. It goes through the process of allowing property owners to object to how the money is sort of divided out. And then it also talks about allowing property owners would be able to pay it immediately, or they could divide it up for annual payment over up to 10 years. And then finally, it also authorizes the city to place a lien on the property if it's not paid. So that's basically what, it's a more complicated ordinance than that, but that's basically generally what it does. Again, it is not doing any assessments now. It's just sort of setting up a framework if you wanted to do it in the future. So with that, if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Councilmember Beeson.
I have 3. I'm sorry in advance.
Yeah, it's okay.
What are some of the improvements that could be made on the road with this levied assessment?
So it specifically talks about that. It includes grading, regrading, paving, repaving, construction, reconstruction, and altering of streets, alleys, sidewalks, and other public places or ways, along with any type of features within them, like connections to sewers and things like that, so,
And it would be levying it on specifically the adjacent property?
right.
Could you provide a hypothetical example, obviously not based on anything specifically, of city wants to do X, Y, and Z, and how that would go?
Yeah, so I think what would happen is you would say, okay, here's the road that we're gonna do, either the whole road or a portion of the road. We find that it's necessary to do this improvement, whatever it is, whether it's a sidewalk or whatever it is, you would have to lay that out. You would have to go take it to a meeting and have a resolution saying that that's necessary and sort of spelling out what the improvements would be. It would then be advertised, and then it would have to come back to you for you to adopt an ordinance. At that point in time, you would then, I think, contract for it and figure out sort of what the cost was gonna be. And once you know what the cost is gonna be to construct it, you would appoint a 3-person board of appraisers who would be responsible for apportioning out how much each property owner owed, if that makes sense. So, and you're really gonna do it based on the proportion of how much of their land is touching. You know, so if it's based on lineal feet, essentially, on where it touches the public improvement. Does that make sense? That's all in the statute, how they did that. And then it would come back to you again, and people would have the opportunity to have to be advertised again, and some of those property owners would be able to bring to you and have sort of a hearing about whether that needed to be adjusted.
Got it. And my last question is, if you mentioned that it's already in state statute, then why do we need to have it again in city code if we would already, I assume, defer to the state statute?
We need to have it because we need to have adopted rules that guide us if we're gonna do it. Because like I said, we only have that very brief, basic authorization in the charter. We need to have adopted rules that allow us to do it. And this wouldn't necessarily be the only way to do it, but since it's already adopted in state law, it seemed like the logical way for us to do it so that we know that we're protecting these rights.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you for walking us through that. Using just kind of another hypothetical example, just out of curiosity, and I'll use one not even in Roswell. So in Buckhead, there was I'm blanking on the road name right there, but basically there was a bar that had gone in that ended up creating an enormous amount of pedestrian traffic over this very dangerous road, and very sadly there were kids getting hit by cars on that. Hypothetically, something like this, is there the ability to add pedestrian safety features or aspects that would make something safer when there was a danger and things like that? Is that?
Yeah, I think it talks about reconstruction and altering of streets, and I think safety measures would be included within that.
Yeah, and of course, I pray nothing like that ever happens in Roswell, and I pray nothing like that ever happens again in Buckhead. But just that was something that kind of came to mind when you were discussing, kind of walking through those different things. Thank you. A motion to move this forward.
Okay, question by Councilmember Beeson.
I guess it's probably less of a question, more of a statement, but in the form of a question, why is it that we would be billing the adjacent property owners in this instance, or creating an assessment for them, when this is really a part of network infrastructure? I realize in your example, the bar in this instance would be getting the benefit because they have increased pedestrian traffic, but that bar 30 years from now might not be here, but that sidewalk will still very much be there. It's just very odd to me from the perspective of us as a city providing a service and then going into something like network infrastructure, which is not isolated to one area in a vacuum, billing back to that individual property owner. Do you have examples of other cities and where they've done this?
I don't. All I can tell you is that it's something that is allowed under Georgia law, and it was a power that was specifically granted to the city of Roswell in the charter when it was adopted.
Attorney Davidson.
So an example this is not actually true, but an example could be when Canton Street, there was nothing at Canton Street, the city came in and put in the brick sidewalks. That was an improvement that they could assess those property owners for because it benefits the public, but those property owners would pay for it by lineal footage.
I'll give you, that's an excellent example, and I guess that's why I was asking, because we run an office right off of Canton Street. I don't have pedestrians that ever visit my office. I don't have many people from the public who ever visit me. But that means that we would be billed for infrastructure that my neighbor is getting a benefit from because by proxy, I am there. It's odd to me, but okay.
Councilmember Hall.
Just to clarify, this is in our charter and we don't have the right rules, and this is, we're dotting the i's, crossing the t's, adding the rules that our charter requires.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is the bare minimum, this is what the state has.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
Motion to move this forward.
Motion by Councilmember Palermo. Second by Councilmember Hall. Further discussion, Councilmember Beeson.
To clarify, this goes to, because we're amending the ordinance, this would still go to 2 further readings, is that correct? Got it.
All right, so with that, we had a motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Hall, a discussion item. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, it passes. All opposed? All right, thank you.
And was that a vote? I didn't see, was that a vote or an abstention?
That was an approval.
We moved it forward, we have more,
Yeah.
we have more discussion.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, okay, that was, yes. All right, under Public Works, item number 8. Consideration to award a task order to Star White House for Don White Memorial Park construction documents in an amount not to exceed $483,650. Mr. Watson and Mr. Leatherman.
Surprising everybody, right? Here's how we break down silos. This is very exciting to be here tonight for the next 3 items. First, to kind of give you a background of why both Jeff and I are coming up here with these 3 items. The projects that we're bringing forth originated in Rec and Parks. So this goes back to the River Park Master Plan. In March, when the city upheld the CIP division, there has been this transition of taking projects that have originated in field departments, in this case Rec and Parks, and slowly transitioning those over to the CIP division. And here are 2 examples of those projects. So this is why kind of we're both up here. So the first one is Don White Memorial Park. Currently, there is a approved schematic design that was done earlier this year. That was done by Star White House. This task order will allow Star White House to complete all of the construction documents, as well as support the city in the bidding process. And staff recommends awarding the contract to Star White House and moving forward. Any questions?
Mr. Watson, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Watson? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously, thank you. Item number 9, consideration to award a contract to Triscapes Incorporated for the construction of Ace Sand Phase 1 in an amount not to exceed $2,116,301.95. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. This is extremely exciting. So I know this has been in the process for quite a while. And I don't know why Jeff is having me do this, because this is a lot of kudos to you.
CIP division.
That's right. So this is the award of the construction contract to Triscapes, Inc. To carry forth with Phase 1 of Ace Sand, which is the fitness trail loop. And this was put out to bid in April. We had 6 interested parties. We did get 1 bid, negotiated with them, and would recommend awarding this contract to Triscapes. Any questions, council?
Any questions for Mr. Watson? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. Item number 10, consideration to award a task order to Columbia Engineering for construction management services in an amount not to exceed $289,500. Mr. Watson.
Sir, so
I just noticed a subcontractor that was mentioned for the construction materials testing, whom I work with, so I will be recusing. I don't work with Columbia, but they do have a sub listed, so I am out.
All right, thank you. That is noted for the record. All right, Mr. Watson, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So on the item that you just approved to move forward, we are engaging Columbia Engineering to provide as owner's rep for the construction of ASAN Phase 1. Columbia's a great company, worked with them many years, and definitely recommend awarding this to them. Any questions from council?
Council, any questions of council? Yes, Councilmember Morthland.
It is nice to see you two working so well with each other. Congratulations. Motion to move this forward.
All right, we have the motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, that passed unanimously as well, and great job, gentlemen. Under Recreation and Parks, if someone can have Councilmember Beeson come back in. All right, under Recreation and Parks, item number 11, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Prime Contractors for renovations for historic town square in an amount not to exceed $506,696. Mr. Leatherman.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. First and foremost, as Brian left the stage, just want to thank both he and Sharon for all of their hard work. This is one of the last projects that as we make the transition into the CIP team, this was already nearly substantially complete through the bidding process, and so we're continuing to take the lead on these improvements in particular and presenting it. We have one other project out at East Roswell that's kind of following the same path right now, but we'll continue to consult with our CIP team as we move these two projects through from a department perspective. But they truly, both Sharon and Brian, have done an outstanding job standing up their new division and then getting up to speed and really truly assisting our department on a number of items, and I can't thank them enough. The town square improvement projects, you recall from a couple of months ago, we went through a process of reviewing these upgrades to this project. I want to point out one thing on the final drawings that we're recommending tonight. When we originally bid the project, we had to extend the bidding process a couple of times in order to get a responsive bidder. That bid came back roughly $300,000 over what our anticipated budget was, and so we've had to value engineer this project down to what you're presented with tonight for a contract award. Primarily, those changes were around the fountain area, and you can see the circle and the secondary circle around the fountain. The original project scope included expanding what I'll call a patio improvement around that fountain to expand some seating areas and some improvements in that space. That was a significant cost to the project that we are recommending with this contract award to eliminate from the project during this phase, and it's something that we can come back to later with some additional funding and add to this park site moving forward should we choose in a future budget year as we continue to look at improvements in and around the historic district. So that we were able to, by eliminating that component of the project, we were able to negotiate this project down to a not to exceed amount of $530,000. And I want to request one other change. You'll see in the title, we do have an error in the amount. It says $506,000. So if you choose to move this forward to council, we are requesting an amendment to that number to a not to exceed $530,000. That's reflected in the procurement memo. It was just a drafting error on our side. And if you'd like to see the budget breakdown, we can provide that to you. We do have it on a slide. But that is the one request that we do have in this item, is to make that amendment in your motion. With that, be happy to entertain any questions on what we've done with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Leatherman. Councilmember Morthland.
Can you shed some light on when this would be ready to roll? Is this going to be open?
Yeah, so Taylor is, we're ready to issue the notice to proceed as soon as this goes to council. So the sooner we can get this to council, the better. Our target is to get this done before November, the end of November, so that we can have the Christmas trees in this park site. So the sooner the better, as we move this project forward and for final approval at council.
Councilmember Hills. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Knighton. With the elimination of that additional paver area around the center, are there still in the plans some seating, or has that been tabled for the moment?
It has not been tabled. We actually already have some of the seating available to us. We've got extra seating out at Heart of Roswell Park right now, and some of that seating would be moved into this project area. Once we finish, we'll have to kind of see how we have ADA access and where we can actually place it, since we're limiting our space. But we do plan on adding seating in this space.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
This looks beautiful and it's on my computer and I cannot get it big enough to read. Can you just walk me through each of these little?
Sure. Taylor, if I missed something, let me know. So on the pathway, maybe,
Yeah,
well,
I'm sorry, if you could use the point, that
Yeah,
point
sure.
may help, yeah.
that'd be great. So project scope includes improvements to the pathways. So the brick pathways, if you walk in the park right now, we've got some significant areas that are really uneven in that space. And the original intent was to open up this park for longer use into the evening time. And so as we looked at the project site, we wanted to improve and level out all of these pathways in this project area. As we invite people into the park later into the evening, you start to see some shadows in those pathways and it becomes a little bit of a hazard to walk in. Then we bring in the lighting, which you see here, and we've added some significant lighting into this park. We usually recommend about 50 foot on center. We've actually brought lighting in to 30 feet on center to truly brighten up that park area so it really has a much more vibrant feel to it. Those are the historic lamp fixtures that you'll see along the historic district area, so they match the historic intent of the project. It's hard to see right here in the center. I'm pretty excited about this feature. We're going to be redoing and rehabbing the entire fountain so that it actually holds water and drains when we need it to. The other side of it is we're adding some LED lights into the fountain area. So we'll be able to change some colors in that as we do community celebrations. We'll be able to complement some of those community celebrations with color patterns within those light fixtures that shine up onto the fountain and onto the monument there. We're also eliminating this, and Ms. Russell unfortunately left, but the walkway to nowhere on this side of the project, and she's pointed that out to a couple of times, and she's 100% correct. It's a very confusing pathway that essentially ends at a locked gate, and there are no sidewalk connections that would connect you along Highway 9. And so we're eliminating those stairs. And we're bringing a planter component into this area so that you really have a destination where you can have some planting right here. We're looking at some interpretive signage that would interpret this area across the street from a historic interpretation perspective. And that will be included as part of this project scope. Those are the major components. We've already started some of the tree work and pruning some of the trees to make way for the improvements. We also have some new plantings that will potentially happen over here in the corner and along this corner right here if the budget allows us. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you did.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Would it be okay if I went up and pointed out something right there?
Absolutely, please.
Is this helpful?
Several questions.
You want that?
No, I'll just.
Okay.
I just have a general question about planters. Is this transportation or parks and rec that you put planters along this area right here to complement the look that's over there?
The box planters right here in this area?
And real nice decorative.
Yeah. I'd be happy, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to connect with my counterpart with Mr. Littlefield and ask that question of where do those fall within the right-of-way in this area and how those could potentially be maintained in the future. I also have a meeting with some of the property owners on a separate project out in that area that we can incorporate that conversation with.
All right, thank you. And that's noted, thank you. Councilmember Beeson.
Do we have an ADA compliant entrance to this park that doesn't necessitate stairs, and where is it?
Yes, ma'am, right here. So
Oh, okay, got it.
Yep, there's a rampway that comes off of this section, and we actually have on-street ADA parking right here to help facilitate that access location.
Got it, but that's the only location where ADA is.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that going to be, or is it currently, and I totally have missed it in the past, is that clearly signed? So that, say for instance, I were a wheelchair user, I'm not doing a full block of a loop to try to figure out where I can get into this park.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would have, I know that I've looked at it before because we've checked grades and slope to make sure everything's accurate. We did recently comply with the handrails on the corners, making sure those were ADA compliant as well. But on the ramp that you're asking about, there is signage. Nick, do you know right off the top of your head? Okay.
Yeah. Because my concern is, I'm gonna point Vanna White style. No, it's okay, you're good. If I'm coming off of Park Drive, I believe that's also a couple of handicap spaces in that vicinity, including that one, yeah. If I were to hypothetically park there, and I am not a wheelchair user, but I can be fairly empathetic as someone who is a double stroller user, doing that full block, being like, how in the world do I wish myself into this park? If we could get some more clear signage on that, especially adjacent to the other ADA compliant spaces, that would be very helpful.
All right, thank you, yes. Any further questions, comments? Councilmember Morthland.
Last question. What's the first color you're going to turn the fountain?
Pink.
Well, we're going to be heading into the holiday season, so I feel some festive holiday colors are going to be, probably some red and green's going to be hanging out in that as we open up for our Christmas tree plan.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the 530,000.
530,000, okay. All right, motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, all in favor, yes, all right, thank you. All right. Next item, thank you, gentlemen. Next item, item number 12, consideration of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 10, Section 10.3 to Section 10.3.27, signs requiring a permit, Section 10.3.32, crown sign, and Section 10.3.4.1, sign illumination. That would be Mr. Gaines and Ms. Dybel. All right. All right, let's pause for just a moment. Okay. All right. All right, we ready to move forward?
All right, good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. This item before you is for the consideration of the text amendment to the Unified Development Code, Article 10, Section 10.3 to Section 10.3.27, signs requiring a permit, and Section 10.3.32, crown sign, and Section 10.3.41, sign illumination. This item may look familiar to you because you all actually considered the first reading of a proposed ordinance addressing these topics at your July 10th mayor and council meeting. That proposed amendment included some changes to Article 13 as well. We took some of all of those same proposed changes, modified them a bit, and moved them all to Article 10. So we'll kind of go through the nuts and bolts of that here this evening. And I'll save reading the actual agenda description, but we can move right into the draft ordinance, which is before you. If you look on packet page 193, you'll see the beginning of the changes or the proposed amendments outlined in red. Okay. The first piece is the provision for conditional use. So to allow for crown signage specifically within the historic district, it will be required to receive a conditional use approval from the mayor and city council. This request, if you all approve this ordinance, or first of all, move this ordinance back onto a mayor and council agenda, these conditional use requests would come directly to you all as a body and would not go to either the planning commission or the historic preservation commission first. We also cover some specific standards that would be put in place to regulate crown signage. Three main criteria, the first of which that the building height must be at least 4 stories, that the signage must be in association with an office use, it occupies at least 20,000 square feet of floor area or consists of at least 100 employees, and is located within a multi-story building. Felt that was important to include that last piece there because you wouldn't necessarily want a business that is not located in a multi-story building but happens to be close by or adjacent to one to have their signage on the tall building. So we wanted to make sure that any building that would potentially be allowed to have this signage would actually be housing employees from the business or company that's being advertised. We also included hotel uses as being eligible for consideration of this conditional use approval. Third item is that a maximum of 2 such signs on different sides of a single building would be permitted that are consistent with the character of the surrounding area. Moving on to your next packet page, you'll see 10.3.32 where we get into the details of crown signage in terms of the description and the dimensions. If you look at item 4 under description, it mentions that the crown sign can be internally or externally illuminated, and that crown signs in the historic district would only be allowed external illumination, given that they are granted conditional use approval by mayor and council. If you look at item A under the dimensions table, it mentions that the maximum square footage for a crown sign in DX and DS, which are of course specific zonings to the historic district, would be capped at 90 square feet as opposed to the 250 square feet in other areas where crown signage would be allowed, whether it be, well, other areas where crown signage is allowed, it's by right. The historic district would be the only area for which this conditional use provision would apply. So here we get a bit more into the lighting aspect of it. 10.3.41, external illumination, that piece will be modified to say that the crown signs in DX and DS zoning can be halo or backlit, which both are forms of external lighting, with a Kelvin rating of no more than 3,000. And I believe there's a page in your packet that does demonstrate, and this is something that I think we've looked at in other meetings that we've had, where you see the different tone, warmth, and brightness of the Kelvin scale. I believe that's the last page in the packet for this section, but you can look at that at your leisure and ask any questions if they come about. Next section, 10.3.4.4, the conditional use approval for signage section would be amended to include that crown signs in DX and DS may request a conditional use to be heard before the mayor and council. That again goes back to the first point that we covered, where these items would come directly to you all and would not go before HPC or the PC. Then there was an addition to the severability piece, which we needed to make sure that we included just for the city's protection when it comes to signage and I believe signage and of course freedom of speech provisions, and David can correct me if I'm misspeaking on that part of it. Those were the big changes as far as what we're recommending with this draft ordinance. As part of this exercise, we were asked to research other cities that have historic districts and have varying types of signage and development patterns. Jackie is going to pass out a summary of of some of those findings, and she's also going to show you a montage of photographs from various locations. I'm also going to pass out a hard copy of an image that probably gives the best depiction of what crown signage in a historic district can look like. This one is actually from Louisville, Kentucky, Whiskey Row. Those are channel backlit letters, which this ordinance that we're proposing would not allow, but that just kind of gives you a sense of what it can look like in terms of size, scale, and the brightness of the lighting. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jackie, and she'll talk a little bit more about the findings from our peer cities in detail.
So we were asked to research 7 different cities. So the spreadsheet table that I just pressed out indicates the historic district section from those cities related to square footage, the types of signs, the different historic districts that they have, and what they are looking for, what they indicate, and what they say they can do. We spoke to some people on the phone from the different jurisdictions. If you look in the information table, it might indicate a name of a person that we spoke to there to get some information related to that. So, for example, and then we gathered photos. And so the one picture you sent that just got passed around. So we also have that in here as well. I believe it was our the Whiskey District, Whiskey Row photo down at the bottom. Ours might, did I test this? I don't know if this is gonna work now. Oh boy. Hopefully, I spent a lot of time putting this together. So here's a picture of it during the daytime, to show you kind of a little bit about, this is the city, this is Louisville, and kind of shows you what Whiskey Row looks like. A lot of signs that we found just were blade signs, some walls here and there. Some people call them facade signs. We have projecting signs and blades. Those were the biggest signs that we found when we went and searched all around for these different 7 cities. As you can tell in the spreadsheet as well, the square footage is not huge. The largest we found, and I have an email that I got from Savannah when I spoke to Leah there, the Broughton Sign District, the Broughton Historic Sign District, they had the largest signs, 90 square feet, and that's where we kind of took our number from. That was the largest I could find when we were looking at it. So this is some pictures from Broughton, and it doesn't have the signs at the top. You'll notice that a lot of the pictures we found, there weren't that many. This one here for Whiskey was one of the ones that Daryl found for us that shows it at the top. Well, a lot of ours, a lot of them were down at the bottom, or blade signs. But we have a slew of pictures. This is all Savannah, some different things. You also see a lot of painted signs. They were painted onto the building, very historic, and what people do. We actually have one over here in Roswell on the guys who did the self-storage. They did a painted one.
But you can find that Walgreens sign is down in red. What do you call that?
That would be a wall sign, standard wall. Probably about 20 square feet, maybe 32 max.
But if you look right on the corner, adjacent to the traffic signal, you'll see lower to the ground, Jackie.
Yeah,
You'll
this
see
one here.
that's a projecting
That's a
sign
projecting.
or a blade sign.
Mhm.
And they oftentimes can be larger than that, but that one was obviously done just to show a corporate logo as opposed to having a full word.
So you'll see a lot of projecting signs, somewhere around 32 square feet. Some of them might be 12, some of them might be 9. Those are a little bit smaller depending on where they are. Then you have, let's see if we can get back to this one here. Some of these, some larger signs. Savannah had a lot of marquee signs, which we don't have here. This is a larger projecting sign off of one of the restaurants that we have. Now, we tried to find as many signs as we could on large buildings. On tall buildings, we didn't find all of them, but we did get a collection from a lot of different locations. Here's just some different things showing you, this is just a wall sign on the building, the different sections of the town. This one had one, can't remember where it was specifically. This is, you can see, this is Factors Walk. This is a different historic district in Savannah. And there's, looks as if it's almost painted on, but I think that is actually it's a wall sign with projecting out a little bit from there. So it's the name of that with the River Street Place. Then you have this one, this is Hampton Inn. Actually, they had small signs, as you can see. They have one here, and then they have a little small sign down here. And it's hard to tell, but there might have been a small one up here. We did find a couple of hotels in the different jurisdictions that we looked at were the ones that really had signs at the top of the structure. And then this one here, it's kind of painted on, the Thomas Gamble Building. As you can see, this is 1, 2, 3, it's 4 stories. It's kind of like just below that. So this is also in Savannah. So if we look at, go back to maybe Louisville, you see we had some in Louisville. So we had Whiskey Row, we have the West Main buildings. These had different signs. Here, a lot of signs down at the bottom. We looked for everything that we could find here, but if you can see, a lot of things were lower here. Let me see. Whiskey Kitchen, you can see this. We found one that had, oh yeah, we had to put this. Here's your blade sign that you're looking at, showing Whiskey Kitchen. Yeah. One of my people picked up this one pretty well. Then you have a lot of flags, which we are not putting, and we're not indicating that anywhere. It just got picked up in the signage. Then we had a lot of different jurisdictions. So Chattanooga had some interesting different things in their historic district areas. This was the same Elmo Historic District. As you can see, they have a sign kind of at the top of the building, painted on. It might be a very historic building. Over the years, you find the names of historic buildings that were up there that might still remain. But you can also see that they have a sign here above the canopy. So that was the St. Elmo District. This one has a sign down here at the bottom. This is the Tomorrow Building, and they have one way up here at the top. And as you can see, they have it more painted on down the side of the building. This is all in Chattanooga here. They had some signage here. They have some marquees. And, of course, a blade sign that's sitting right here. Oh, okay. All right, that's all. If you want to see any more, we have tons. But if you have any questions, you can just let me know.
Councilmember Palermo.
Ms. Dibble, I appreciate that presentation. Can you go back to the Word document which showed the requirements in red? Thank you. It's perfect. So my thought process and my inclination is I do want to have an incentive for when we're bringing jobs and bringing office here, as long as it's done appropriately and looking like it would fit in. So a couple just aspects I'd love for this committee to discuss and consider is, for number 2, knowing that I certainly want to both incentivize that for Roswell to be an attractive place to rent floor space as well as to have employees. So I'd rather, if we're to consider this, I'd rather see it be 20,000 square feet of floor area and consists of at least 100 employees. So that's one thing I'd like us to consider, to really be incentivizing both those things. That's number 1. In that same item, I'm actually not sure that I support hotel uses also being eligible, because again, the way I'm thinking about this is really for it to be an incentive around office jobs and office space and creating more just daytime traffic to support our restaurants, et cetera. And at the end of the day, having talked to multiple hotel operators that have come to Roswell, not one of them were focused on this as a major need, especially, and also as I compare to some other hotels around around in different historic areas, including what you showed. So I'm leaning towards not wanting to be for hotel uses, and just when it's occupying at least 20,000 square feet and at least 100 employees. And yeah, for that office use. So that's the one aspect. Another aspect is I'd want to consider this committee to consider is adding a number 4, and then number 4 being only on Highway 9. This is not something that I think would be appropriate on Canton Street or on Green Street or in multiple different places, whereas in Highway 9, I would see more of a potential consideration. So I'd want to see us consider adding a number 4, where this would be just for properties adjacent to Highway 9. So those are my initial kind of reactions and thoughts.
Councilmember Beeson.
I'm of a different frame of mind. I personally find the second rule to be, without bad, lack of a better word, silly. I don't quite frankly care how many employees somebody has, especially locally. A lot of folks are moving to remote employment these days, so even if they're headquartered in the city of Roswell, it doesn't necessarily show the dollar amount. So for example, you can have 100 employees who are making minimum wage, or you can have, we'll say, 20 employees who are making consistently more than that. It's going to be a very different type of employer that you're trying to recruit. Also, I don't think employment standards should dictate signage. In this instance, I don't know that HPC's concerns or planning commission's concerns were contingent on the employer who was located there, nor necessarily the use of the building. And I go back to my comment that I made when we talked about a similar topic a few months ago. To me, hotel also implies wayfinding. Having a separate side conversation with Councilmember Hills, to me, it's more so the concern of aesthetics, not so much that might not be her perspective, but it's less the use of the building and far more, to me, how it's going to look within the context of a historic district. We saw several examples of buildings that were used as hotels. We might not have ones that are necessarily going to be used for offices. We have a really nice sign around the corner that's a self-storage unit. I think within the context, the self-storage sign, in my opinion, looks pretty nice. It's painted on the side of the building. It's externally lit. I think there's ways that we could go about this where you could do external lighting, even with something that's period appropriate lamps. It can be painted on the side or something I forgot what you guys called it. It was in Savannah. You said it might not be painted, but it's slightly elevated, I think was your term? Projected? Yeah. Slightly projected signs. I think there's ways to go about it that it could still be historic within context, look appropriate, and then serve the purpose of whatever commercial entity is located within that building. But that's my opinion.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you. Couple of questions to a couple of my colleagues here. Councilmember Beeson, tell me, not a challenge, just clarification. When you say you don't feel like it matters on either the number of employees or the square footage, do you feel like there's any, like what would be the basis? Let's say there's a great big building going in the historic district, and there are 12 companies that are relevant companies. Like how would you go about that?
So in that case, typically the landlord determines. So they're going to charge rent for whatever their crown sign is going to be, and they're going to be paying a significantly higher rent. We as a city benefit in the end for that because of that increased rent as a cost is going to be passed along to us in the form of tax dollars, theoretically through commercial tax dollars, and how much they're going to be using to occupy that facility. I don't think most landlords. Some landlords will dictate based off the square footage you're occupying in the building, and it's not necessarily 20,000 square feet, but they're going to go by what's the majority of the square feet in that building. So in that sense, I would rather defer to the owner of the building to determine if they want to have a crown sign, because they might not even want one, and if they do, who is going to get that right.
Okay, thank you. And then Councilmember Palermo, as far as not applying to hotels, can you expound on that just a little bit, please, sir?
And so for that part, other things I said I feel strongly about, that one I do not feel strongly about. My preference would be that we don't have crown signs on every building. my preference is it is something more special. And I think wayfinding for hotels is very important, but the wayfinding, as we saw with a lot of the pictures, I feel, is more at the pedestrian level. You know, someone's walking, they got dropped off at the Uber, they you know, whatnot, and able to see it at a normal level, which our code already allows. And so from that standpoint, I question, does a hotel really need it? And then also what we've seen is both with the Southern Post one, where they'd been moving fast, their big concern was, or their big slowdown was just the fact that the actual Southern Post was really slowed down and delayed, which they had contingencies, and that's where they were not moving as fast. But they never once were bringing up concerns about that or anything like that, and they already knew the hotel tenant, all that stuff. Same thing with the West Alley one, there was an operator there in discussions, and never once was our lack of crown signs coming up. So that's where I see it more for office. But again, if this committee said, you know what, we want it to be office and hotel, that's something I support. I don't support it for it just being anything, because I do feel it should be an incentive. I do think it should be something where not every building automatically gets a crown sign.
Well, then, I'll wrap up with this. I know you mentioned not having anything off of Highway 9. My biggest concern with all of this signage, particularly Crown sign, is that we maintain the integrity of the historic district and right there off of it even. I mean, I will venture to say I was hell-bent when we voted this through that I wanted to protect the historic district. I do not want to have what would, to me, be appropriate on 400 or in Buckhead, which is fine. I don't think that fits here. I love the photo that was the Maxwell brothers that was on the side of the building. I also love the one that was the Hampton Inn that was hanging. I guess that's a projection or blade with an iron. And I like that those are so different. I think they could both fit, and it also fits the character of our different roof line, you know, where each individual business owner, when the city was, or when the downtown was built, you know, each one had its own character. And I say snaggletooth, but that sounds really bad. I mean, I think it's a very character building type look, and I think that's what the appeal is in our historic district. So I would be willing to be okay with hotel signage and things off of Highway 9 that are not just on Highway 9, but I'm very, very hung up on super glossy, super sexy in that manner that would be more, yeah, it's appropriate in other areas. I just don't believe that that's appropriate in the historic district.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Councilwoman Hills, when you say super glossy, super defined, is that, I mean, I'm with you.
Yep.
I just want to get a definition of, is it brightness, is it design, is it?
What are your recommended aesthetics?
Gosh, I just want to answer historic, which is not really bright and not a bunch of big interior lit letters. No disrespect to Target, but not a Target sign. No disrespect to Racetrack in Smyrna. You know, those are appropriate in those areas, but they are more indicative of a much high-rise area, much denser build for commercial and otherwise. And I'd like to just, I think that's too big and too New York City or downtown Atlanta for what our historic district cries for.
So then, if we have general provisions, number 4, a crown sign can be internally or externally illuminated, would you prefer that to be no internal?
I think that's what it currently is.
Right.
We're actually proposing this, for this, it would only allow for external.
How about no external? How about just a sign that has no light?
External would be like a shepherd's hook or that kind of thing, correct?
Yeah, so you're
I would be okay with
Or
that.
a halo where there's.
And I don't want to act like the expert. I'm just saying that there's some things that I don't think fit.
I'm just trying to reach
Yeah.
a consent
Absolutely.
in agreement. I think, I'm just trying to understand, again, I'm trying to appreciate what you're saying and understand what exactly type of a crown sign you would be comfortable with. I disagree with Councilman Palermo, and he and I know this. I'm much more in favor of conditional uses being created so that we have options coming down the road and we don't end up having this kind of a situation. We're looking at a possibility of bringing in larger tenants in a very tight office building environment, and I think that's great that we are revisiting this and saying that we have larger, and I'm sorry, Councilwoman Beeson, but I do want some parameters. I do. It's hard to define them, but I do want to have we're looking for a larger impact as far as why they would be allowed to have this kind of a reward in my mind. But I don't want to limit that to Highway 9. I want to be able to have this discussion based on conditional, if it comes up again in some requests. And so that's my request, is that we.
I agree with that on conditional.
Councilmember Peason.
Hearing the others' feedback, to me, in this instance, because it is conditional use entirely, correct?
Yes.
It will always go to mayor and council for approval.
Correct.
As long as it meets those standards.
Yes.
So again, I'm of the frame of mind, this goes back to, God, not to bring up carriage house. I know those are some triggering words right now, but not to be bringing up a situation where we have a very specific situation that we're trying to legislate for in this instance, where we have someone who might be asking, and in this case, we are trying to make a pathway for it to be allowed. Instead of going as far as defining an item B subsection 2 of it being 20,000 square feet or 100 employees in order to make it special, but also make it specialized based off the requester. I hear you of we don't want one necessarily every 5 feet. Vibes, totally get it. But I think in that conditional sense, I think it still goes to mayor and council for approval. We can say, oh, we have X number of signs within a half-mile radius. We would prefer there not to be one here. So that number 2, I just don't want to leave people out on that situation that it might be appropriate. That said, I would much rather focus on, instead of the conditions or the standards in this instance, based off of who is going there and much more how it looks. So again, trying to set those aesthetic standards, trying to say it can only be painted or cannot be lifted X amount off the side of the building, low profile sign. It would have to be external, either through, what is it called? Shepherd's hook lamp? Oh, well, it sounded correct. I know what you're talking about. It's the old school lamps. Or, in my opinion, potentially not a spotlight per se, but a projected light that's maybe on a floor below it. So example, if you had like a patio space, or you had a driveway that's covered, there might be external lights on that that's shining up just onto that painted part. It doesn't look like a McDonald's that's open 24/7, but in this case, you're like, oh, this looks historically appropriate. So I would much rather focus on setting historically appropriate aesthetic standards as opposed to how many people are there, and even in this instance, roads specifically, but that's me.
All right. Councilmember Palermo.
So I think the issue with leaving it too open-ended is, I feel, not helpful for businesses and developers, and also not helpful for residents who might not want it, where they have to then feel like they've got to mobilize and they've got to come and thinking that just anything's possible based off of a developer's request. I think that's an issue that I think got this city and a lot of its former elected officials in trouble in the past, of just creating that uncertainty. So I think the more certainty we can give, the better. And a way to really ensure that this is something that we stand by is to show that it is something that's not common. It's truly a true real incentive, something that we're trying to get to Roswell, and ensuring that it's not going to be every 5 feet. And I think that's a way to do it. So again, my preference would be just Highway 9, but because I don't think it'd be appropriate for Green Street or Canton Street and different places. But that being said, if there's a preference to just leave that still as a possibility, I certainly support that. Again, I think it does need to be a true real incentive, which is why I think that at least 20,000 square feet and at least 100 employees is gonna help really just set that threshold, frankly, high, and making it so we're not gonna have as many. It shows that we really are trying to do something that Roswell's not done well in the past, which is actually bring in larger employers and more jobs and more office space to a single tenant versus a lot of small ones.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
I appreciate that, and I what I might like is when we're going to be revisiting this, correct?
Yep. Twice.
A little better understanding of those numbers, and in fairness to Councilwoman Beeson, it is reasonable to say, what are these parameters and what are they based on? Why do you have these numbers? what is going on in office? You know, what is a normal corporate headquarter? What is the size? How many employees do they have? A hotel, how many employees do they have when they have X number of rooms? I mean, I think a nice, better understanding of that, I would think that might be helpful as we move forward.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Northland?
So this may be a question for Daryl here, but as this is written right now, how many properties would this apply to?
Probably applied to one, probably applied to one at the moment.
One at the moment, maybe two.
Maybe two.
Maybe two. Okay. But the point in the verbiage, the way that this is written with the 100 employees and 20,000 square feet or more is to make it very specific for a large organization like that to be attracted to Roswell. And this is one of those things that would help maybe soften the blow or be a little bit more receptive when it comes to Roswell. So I'm actually okay with the 100 employees, 20,000 square feet, only on Highway 9 and the hotel piece. I'm amenable either way there, but I do like the square feet and the employees.
Councilmember Hills.
One follow-up to that, if someone else were to come in, they could always ask for a variance on that, correct? I mean, if it's coming to mayor and council anyway. If they had 50 employees, or they were only occupying 18,000 square feet.
With it being in Article 10, it would be eligible for variance. But of course, so they'd have to apply for both a conditional use and a variance.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
If the Highway 9 is included, that's going to disallow variance for anywhere off of Highway 9. Am I correct? In other words, if we put in here number 4 that it's Highway 9 only, then we cannot discuss something, let's say West Alley location or.
Right, they wouldn't even be eligible for the conditional use provision. So, yeah, you'd have to be eligible for the conditional use to even begin to ask for a variance in that instance.
All right, can I make a motion?
Sure, Councilmember Vanstrom, yes.
I would like to move this forward as is, as written, with the and consists. I'm happy for Councilman Palermo to add that and.
And what about the lighting?
And the lighting would be non-internal, which is.
That's already how it is.
Sorry.
Oh, it is already, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, yeah.
it's hard to tell black or red, what's in and what's out.
So with the and with that lighting that you've just confirmed, I second that motion.
All right. So motion by Councilmember Vanstrom with some added or modified language. Second by Councilmember Palermo. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, well, that concludes the committee.
Oh, wait, well.
Yes?
So when would this be coming to council? So I'm wondering if, since we've already had Planning Commission and HPC review this, we've already had, you had all that other information. I'm wondering if we should have this actually come to a special called meeting on the 31st, since we'd be here anyways for a open mic night. And then I'm not sure if there's other details we should provide to make sure the timing's clear. Yeah, special call, you do call. Yeah,
First reading, second reading.
All right, let's, I believe I hear a recommendation from Councilmember Palermo, at least discussion point.
So it's two things. One, recommendation that we would have this come to a specially called meeting the night of July 31st, because we're already here for an open mic night, so we'd have it go right before, right after that. That's one thing to consider. The second thing is really just a question on what is the process that once this comes, whether it's July 31st or at a later date.
All right, Councilmember Vanstrom.
There was discussion, does it have to go back through PC, HPC, all that?
I guess.
So because this has already come through the process, it doesn't have to, but I believe there might be an advertising requirement. So you might want to not do Monday, but the next council meeting, come directly to council.
And then, so this would instead not be a special call meeting on July 31st, it would just be the next regularly scheduled mayor and council meeting. The question is, would it be first reading or initiation? What's coming on that? Yeah.
We won't have time, the ad won't run in the paper until next Thursday, because we have to send the ad on Thursday. It runs the following Thursday, which is the 3rd, and that is less than 15 days prior to the 14th. So it will not be able to make it to until the 4th Monday in August for the first reading.
But that'd be the first reading, okay.
Yes, that would be the earliest we can make it due to the advertising requirements.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, all right, unless there was a special call before the 28th, which you could expedite somewhat, and then have the second reading presumably on the 28th. Again, if there are any, all right, yeah, I was just mentioning that if mayor and council were inclined, you could have a special called meeting somewhere along the 17th, 20th, I don't even know what those dates are, and then have the second reading on the 28th. Is that
And so
correct?
it would be correctly, this would run in the paper the 3rd, which means the earliest it could go would be Friday, the 18th. So, okay. So it could go, so it's either it goes Monday, August 28th, or any time between the 18th and the 28th
Right,
of August.
that's right.
So you've got a little time to decide if you want to have a special call meeting or not.
All right. Okay. All right. Any further discussion regarding that item? Obviously, it was passed to move forward, and then we had discussion. No action items from the discussion at this point. Is that correct? All right. Okay. All right. With that, we conclude our committee meeting. We'll have a motion of adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Beeson, second by Councilmember Vanstrom. All in favor? All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Make sure I got something for you here.